Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Modern Taoist. And my name is Kit Man, and I hope you're having a fine day, afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, whenever you happen to be listening to this. I certainly do appreciate you taking time, giving, it's not a small thing to give someone an hour of your attention. It's not a small thing to take the time to like or subscribe or follow. And I understand that, and I appreciate it. Everybody's kind words that I am getting all the time in emails through the website, which is Daoananda, DAOANANDA.org, or through social media. You guys have just been, it's fantastic. And, when you try to walk in a Taoist way, the high spirit, the high joy, as my teacher used to call it, the high joy, means much more when it is purposeful. And I know that when you take the time to listen to this or take the time to reply or send an email, I know that that part of your life that day is purposeful and that you're doing this for a reason, and I appreciate it. Today on the show, this episode comes to us, by the way, from my wife, who said, hey, if you ever get around to it, here's a topic that I think might help other people. And that is the topic of the Tao of having feelings, which sounds a little strange, right? Because we all have feelings. But sometimes those feelings don't feel, pardon the use of the word feel here, but they don't feel safe. Or you have trained yourself to not speak your truth, or others have trained you through their actions how you cannot speak to them. We teach each other how to treat us. Do you understand? If I explode and get angry at the tiniest little things, well, then people are going to stop coming to me, because they're going to walk on eggshells and think that, oh my God, here we go again. Whereas if I'm receptive and kind and understanding, and if I listen with purpose, listen to hear what they're saying rather than listening to reply, then they're going to come back more often. So we teach people how to treat us. I grew up in a house where speaking your truth was not safe. If you had an opinion, to be honest, it could be slapped out of you. If you showed anger, you would be punished. If you showed sadness or disappointment, that could be used against you. That kind of environment teaches you quickly that your feelings, especially what people view as negative feelings, but we understand as Taoists that negative feelings that doesn't exist. It's just a feeling that is counter to what everybody else wants you to feel. But that kind of environment teaches you that these feelings are dangerous, not just inconvenient, but something to hide if you want to stay out of quote unquote trouble. And here's the part that stays with you, because when you grow up, silence becomes second nature. You learn to swallow your truth before it reaches your mouth. You practice masking what you really feel. And by the time you reach adulthood, you realize you've been trained not just to hide your emotions, but to be afraid of them. You don't know how to say what's real without expecting consequences from that other person that you're sharing with. You don't know how to share your feelings without either stuffing them down or letting them explode. So many people live in that space of either never showing their feelings or always showing them in a reactive, sometimes violent way. Plenty of people didn't grow up in abusive homes, but they still got the same message. Don't cry, don't complain, don't rock the boat, put a smile on your face, grin and bear it, stay positive, don't make trouble. Those all are different phrases, but they all mean the same thing. Your feelings are too much. The safest thing to do is shut up. Taoism teaches us something very different, though. Because Taoism, as I said a minute ago, it doesn't divide emotions into safe and unsafe or acceptable and unacceptable. It treats them the way it treats everything else, right? As part of the flow. Joy, grief, anger, love, disappointment, relief. These are all weather systems. They move through, they shift. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it rains, but it all belongs. When you stop fearing your feelings, you stop needing to hide them. And when you stop hiding them, that is when you can begin to communicate honestly, without apology, without being defensive, without aggression. You can say what's real without wounding someone else. You can hear someone else's truth yourself without being defensive and taking it as an attack. All right? But that's what this lesson is about, because we have to unlearn the fear of our feelings. The Taoist way is not to grin and bear it. The Taoist way is to let what's true be true. Face it, speak it, let it move through without violence, without shame, without fear of judgment, without fear of someone else being defensive, without you being defensive. Let what's true be true. When you grow up being taught that feelings aren't safe, you carry that training into adulthood, whether you want to or not. It doesn't matter if the lesson came to you through violence or through subtle shaming or just through 1,000 small nudges to be polite and keep it positive. It's the same result because you learn to swallow the truth. At first, it looks like you're doing fine. You keep things smooth at work. You avoid conflict at home. You laugh off discomfort. You're on the surface, you're fine, you're grand, everything's Copacabana. But underneath, there's a cost, because every time you bite back your truth, you hand a piece of yourself away. Every time you push your feelings down, you think they vanish? They don't vanish. They sit there waiting like magma in a volcano, waiting, bubbling, making that gurgle noise, waiting for something to shake you just enough for them to come shooting out sideways and put a big crack in the middle of the mountain. You see it in relationships where people don't talk about what's wrong until it turns into anger. You see it in friendships that stay on the surface because honesty feels risky. You see it in workplaces where everybody is fine until they burn out and quit and throw everything into the air and say, "That's it, I've had it." The pattern is always the same, always. Silence until explosion. Even if those explosions are small. Because when you've learned when you've never learned rather how to say what you feel, the only options you have left are stuffing and then bursting. And it's not just about expressing yourself, it's about receiving when other people express themselves. If you've been trained to fear your own feelings, then someone else's truth is freaking terrifying. A partner says they're hurt, and you don't hear that they're hurt. You heard that you are being blamed for hurting them. They say that they're hurt and you hear it as an attack on you. A coworker offers you feedback and you tense up like they've just pulled a gun on you. If you've grown up and built these walls around you, even simple honesty feels dangerous because it presses down on an old wound that tells you that feelings can't be trusted and that feelings will only bring pain. And from a Taoist perspective, this is where we get tangled, right? The Tao doesn't say hide your anger. It doesn't say put on a happy face, but it also doesn't say let your feelings run wild like a rabid wolf. It teaches us to meet what's real without fear, without clinging, and without denial. Okay? The practice is in learning to let it move. Let your feelings move without shame, without pretending they're not there. So before we can talk about expressing feelings clearly, we have to face this. Most of us simply were never taught how to express ourselves in a productive and positive way. Feelings were weaponized. We were never taught to inhabit our feelings honestly. And until we unlearn that cycle will keep repeating itself. Silence, explosion, regret, repeat. Silence, explosion, regret, repeat. So with all things Taoy, what do we always say? Notice. Simple awareness. How do you think about this? Okay, right. Spend some seconds here and think about this. How do you handle your feelings right now? Do you bury them? Do you deflect with humor? Do you numb them out with distraction? Do you understand how you've been trained? Have you ever thought about it before? Maybe this is the first time you're even thinking about this and you're like, oh my God. Yeah, my father, or my mother, my grandfather, whoever, they used to always tell me, just put on a smiley face. You know? In the Tao Te Ching, it says right there, the master does not seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting. She is present and can welcome all things. What is that line about? It's not about the outside world. It's about the weather inside of us. Joy, grief, anger, fear, contentment, restlessness. These are all things that arrive. They stay for a time and then they move on. Taoism doesn't say welcome the joy and exile the grief. It says welcome all things. Don't grasp at one and fear the other. Be present as each one shows up. Every one of us can be calm when we go to the mailbox and there's a check for $1,000. Not many of us can be calm when we go to the mailbox and there's a summons because someone is suing us. One thing brings joy, the other brings chaos. And so what happens when joy arrives? We welcome it. But when grief arrives, we try to exile it. We weren't raised to welcome anything except the pleasant. We learned early which feelings were safe and which would get us punished. Anger might have been met with violence or shame. Sadness might have been met with, come on, man up, toughen up. What are you crying about? Even excitement may have been labeled as too much. Little by little, we carved the world of feelings into two piles. Ones we're allowed to show and the ones we are not. Psychologists have a big phrase for this. We can get all psychology if you want. It's called emotional avoidance. Okay, sure. If you have a psychology degree, you probably went through a bunch of hours of studying to learn about emotional avoidance. Really, all you had to do was become a Taoist, and we call it imbalance. Also, it didn't cost you like $100,000, right? It's just called imbalance. Let's go to what Taoists love to do. Let's talk about water. A dam built across a river doesn't stop the water. It builds pressure. And that's exactly what happens with feelings. Push them down, and they settle as tension, anxiety, and exhaustion. And they creep into our interactions with other people as irritability or silence or withdrawal. Better to say nothing. Oh boy, but when that dam finally cracks, the whole town gets flooded. Right? Watch out. But here's the irony. The more we fear our feelings, the less safe we actually become. Suppressed anger doesn't protect anybody. Avoided sadness doesn't make us stronger. It leaks out as numbness. It robs us of our joy. Even fear. When you deny fear, it grows larger. Why do you think people always, why do you think that platitude of face your fears became a thing? Because when you deny your fear, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. What we refuse to face rules us from the shadows. But Taoism points to a different direction. It says what you feel is part of life. It's part of the flow. Anger, joy, sadness, fear. These things don't define you. They simply are things. They are passing weather systems in the landscape of your life. Some storms are fierce. Some are mild. Some are permanent. Wait, no, they aren't. We only think they are. No storm is permanent. A storm doesn't show up and never leave. Even if it feels like it's never going to go, it eventually does. Just as the wind moves through the trees without asking for permission, feelings are that wind through us. They move through us whether we want them to or not. So our task is not to exile them, but to notice them, let them be what they are, and allow them to pass when they're ready. It doesn't mean letting your emotions run wild or dumping them onto others without care, because Taoist practice is about balance, honesty without harm, openness without aggression. It starts inside you. When you start labeling the feeling as bad or weak, instead of seeing it for what it is, which is just a signal, a shift, a movement of life, when you can sit with that instead of burying it, you can eventually share it without fear. And again, we got to go back to that same principle applies when you're on the receiving end. If you've made peace with your own feelings, then someone else's truth isn't threatening. You don't need to jump and be defensive. You can let their words land, recognize their feelings as theirs, and you can respond to them with compassion. You don't need to respond from a defensive place of feeling attacked, because you've learned that feelings are okay. So this step at its heart is recognition. It's noticing. It's the Taoist way. Notice. What you feel is not the enemy. It doesn't need to be buried. It doesn't need to be weaponized either. It simply just needs to be acknowledged as part of the flow. I'm angry right now. That's okay. I'm sad right now. Yeah, you probably have good reason. the more space you create to welcome the truth of others, makes you more open yourself. The more you can welcome your own emotions without shrinking, without striking back, and without fear, makes you more receptive to others' emotions. Once you stop fearing your own feelings, the next challenge is, once we've noticed, right? Because we're Taoists and we notice these things. And once we stop fearing our own feelings, the next challenge is, what do we do with them? Most of us never learned this, right? Communication meant compliance. Feelings were something to be managed. And so when you finally try to speak honestly, it comes out all goofy. It sometimes can come out as mushmouth and fumbly. Sometimes it can come out sharp, angry, defensive. Because we have two things. You got two choices here, at least how people feel. This is not the truth. Because what people feel is either ignore it or unleash it. Taoism says, no. A way of moving with truth that doesn't distort it. Okay? We can go back to the water analogy like we always do, because a flood can destroy, but that same water can nourish. So Taoists' practice with feelings, it kind of works that same way. Right? When anger is acknowledged early and expressed with clarity, you want to say something like, I felt dismissed in that moment. Instead of saying to that person, you never listened to me. All you have to say is, oh, I understand. In that moment, I felt dismissed. Once you learn to communicate like that, it becomes a channel for understanding. Let's talk about sadness for a minute. Buried sadness becomes numbness. Sometimes bitterness, mostly it usually becomes numbness. But if you speak that sadness, I'm really hurting right now. Don't put it on someone else. Don't say, you've just hurt me. Simply put it back on yourself. I am hurting right now. That creates a space for connection from that other person. If you say to them, what you just said to me really hurt my feelings, well, that puts them in a defensive posture. When you put words to the feeling without blame, you invite compassion instead of defensiveness. On the other side of that equation, receiving truth requires a Taoist stance as well. If you've been taught to fear your emotions, then someone else's honesty feels dangerous. A friend might say, I felt really hurt. And your reflex is defense. Argue, minimize, turn it back on them. Taoism invites us to hear their truth without assuming that they're defining or putting it on us. Their words are the weather in their sky. They can touch us, but they don't have to unseat us. Pause before you respond. Practically, that's how you handle. Pause before you respond. Breathe once before you get defensive. Ask yourself, notice, is this an actual attack on me, or is this simply just them speaking their truth? 9 times out of 10, it's the latter. And when you don't fight it, when you realize their honesty is not meant to wound you, it simply describes their experience. And you don't have to absorb it as judgment. You can just receive it as information. This balance, the speaking without wounding, hearing without being defensive, this is the Taoist middle way of communication. It is not silence. It is not explosion. It's the steady act of letting truth move without fear. So the question here becomes, how do you normally handle truth? How do you soften it until it disappears? Or do you soften it until it disappears, rather? Do you deliver it like a weapon? Do you get defensive because you think it's directed at you? Right? Taoist practice asks us to find a posture that is clarity without blame, listening without fear. That's how honesty becomes healing instead of harmful. It's one thing to talk about not being afraid of your feelings because, actually that's where we all want to be, but it's another to actually practice that when you're in the middle of a conversation that matters. When your partner is upset, when your coworker is frustrated, when your friend tells you a hard truth, that's where our old training kicks in, that reflex to bury our feelings or lash out, the urge to defend ourselves when someone else shares their feelings. And that's where the Taoist practice makes a huge difference because we're not hiding emotion. It isn't about unloading it recklessly either. It's about finding a posture of honesty. And that posture doesn't just happen. It takes practice. The same way you train your body to breathe deeply, train your mind to let go of noise. These practices are simple. I'll lay a few out for you. They don't require special settings or long retreats or silence next to a river. They can happen in your daily flow of life. Let me give you 3 or 4 Taoist practices to retrain yourself on how you communicate feelings. Number 1, name the feeling, not the blame. Most of us are trained, we talked about it a minute ago. Most of us are trained to put the spotlight outside of ourselves. You made me angry. You embarrassed me. You ruined this. The problem with that is when you say the word you, you've just locked that other person into defense. Get that out of your vocabulary. The Taoist way is to bring the focus to your own center. I felt angry when this happened. I felt embarrassed in that moment. You're not denying your truth, but you're also not handing it to someone else. That small shift is very, very powerful. Do you understand? When you say the word you, it immediately signals to them that they have done something wrong. But when you say I, it signals to them that you are hurting and they can then be compassionate towards you. It keeps the conversation grounded in what's real for you without turning it into a back and forth. The feeling is still there. It's cleaner, though. It's easier to receive. It's harder to argue with. It says, here is the weather in my sky instead of, hey, you, why are you so stormy? Practice number 2. Listen, I like this one. This is one of my favorites. I've said it before. You've heard me say it. If you've listened to this podcast, you've listened to these episodes, you can probably guess what I'm going to tell you to do next. When someone speaks their truth to you, especially if it touches a sore spot, the body reacts instantaneously. Muscles tense, your heart rate spikes, words leap to your tongue. That is conditioning from a long time ago. So what am I going to say to do? I'm going to tell you to insert a breath. One deep, oh boy. In your head, though, don't say, oh boy, out loud. Just take a big deep breath. That pause does 2 things. It breaks the chain reaction. It reminds your nervous system that you're not in danger just because someone else is being honest. And second, it gives you time to choose clarity over being defensive. Instead of snapping back, You can respond in a way that acknowledges their truth without losing your own. It may sound small. Every time I tell you to take a big, deep breath before we do something may sound small, but it's revolutionary. That one small breath, the Taoist practice of mindful breath work, takes you out of the reflex loop and places you into an awareness globe, an awareness bubble. Taoist practice always begins with one small breath. Taoist practice number 3, use small honesty early. Big explosions usually trace back to small truths that went unsaid. We swallow our irritation, our disappointment, our fatigue until the weight becomes too heavy. Then it comes flying out. It bursts out in ways that surprise us, sometimes embarrass us. So release those small truths early before they harden into resentment. That might sound like saying things like, I'm more tired than I realized, or that comment stung a little, or I just need some quiet right now. These aren't dramatic confessions. They're little markers of honesty along the way. And that effect is huge. The pressure never builds up then into an eruption. People around you learn to trust that the words that come out of your mouth will come early and clean, not late and dirty. And practice number 4, separate the person from the storm. If someone says, I felt hurt by what you said, it's easy to hear that as you are hurtful. But Taoist practice wants you to remember what we've been talking about this whole show. The feeling that they're having is the weather in their sky. Visualize them having their own ecosystem, their own weather system, their own world, their own earth in which they inhabit and you do not. Visualize the weather in their sky. You're on a different planet. It doesn't affect you. That perspective can create a little space. You can honor what they're saying without crumbling underneath it. You can listen without rushing to explain yourself or without pushing their words away, just as you wouldn't mistake a storm for the entire sky. If you live in, Colorado right now, and if it's snowing, certainly you don't expect that it's snowing in Tahiti. I can't imagine that you expect that it's snowing even in Texas. You know that it's snowing in your world, in your area, and that it's something that you just have to manage right now. So when somebody comes to you, regardless of how if maybe they don't know how to speak their truth, and maybe they do put blame on you. Maybe they do say, hey, you've hurt me. You're a bad person. You don't know what you're talking about. Create that perspective. Realize that it's snowing in their Colorado, but you live in Tahiti where it is not snowing. So don't be mad at them for being frustrated at the cold. You understand? Don't mistake a feeling for the whole truth. None of these practices are complicated. They're just little shifts. Naming your feelings without blaming, taking a breath before you answer, speak a small truth early, and then separate a person from their passing weather system. Practiced over time, these are going to rewire your whole posture towards communication. I know this from experience. Because once you stop fearing your feelings, You stop armoring yourself against other people's feelings. Conversations become lighter. Truth becomes easier. Speaking and listening starts to feel less like a battle and more like a flow. That's Taoist practice in action. It's not silence, not explosion, but clarity and the middle way. And the hardest part of this work isn't just learning a few new techniques for handling conversations. It's unlearning that identity you built around fear of your own emotions. For many of us, that identity was shaped very early. Maybe you learned that sadness made people uncomfortable, so you swallowed it. Maybe you were told that fear was a weakness, vulnerability was shameful, tears were unacceptable. One way or another, you got that message. Feelings are not safe. And then you carry that message into adulthood. It becomes who you think you are. You become the easygoing one who never admits when something stings, or the strong one who doesn't need to ask for help, the always fine one who pretends exhaustion is freaking normal. These masks don't cover your feelings, they cover your truth. Wear a rubber mask on your face for 3 days and see if it doesn't get heavy and sweaty and disgusting. That's the problem. You can't wear that mask because sooner or later, you got to take it off. Taoism doesn't label feelings as good or bad, safe or unsafe. Doesn't tell you to grin and bear it or explode and let it all fly out. It reminds us that emotions are part of the flow. Natural, transient, not to be clung to nor feared. Anger is a storm. Tears are rain. Joy is sunshine. Fear is lightning. None of them last forever, but all of them belong in nature. And when you stop fearing the weather of your inner life, you stop needing to hide in the basement from the storm. And this is the shift that matters the most. And that is your identity. You stop being the person who fears feelings and you become the person who faces them. Not by force or by drama, but by being present. You begin to see my anger doesn't make me bad. My sadness doesn't make me weak. My fear doesn't make me less of a person. These are simply states that flow through me. And I can meet them honestly. I can communicate them without harming someone else. I can say I feel hurt without attacking another person. I can say I'm tired without an apology. I can say I'm afraid without shame. And this shift changes how you receive other people too. When you're no longer afraid, then someone else's honesty is not scary. When a partner says, I am frustrated by this situation, then you don't crumble and either get mad or leave the room. When a friend says, I feel dismissed, you don't have to rush to defend yourself on why you're being dismissive. When someone at work gives you feedback, instead of bracing for a battle, you can hear it for what it is. It's the truth in that moment. It is not a verdict on your entire worth. And here's the real beauty, though. When you hold this posture, you can create space for better, longer-lasting, fulfilling, fruitful relationships. Why? Because people begin to trust you with their truth. Because they know you won't punish them for it. Conversations are clearer. Decisions are made easier. Because they know they don't have to tiptoe around what's real. They don't have to apologize. They don't have to ask permission. You become the kind of person that people feel safe with. Not because you avoid conflict, but because you meet it without being afraid of it. And these reflexes are not going to disappear overnight. You'll still catch yourself swallowing words, tensing when someone else speaks their truth. But each time you pause, each time you breathe, each time you choose clarity instead of being defensive, you're retraining those habits. And you're not just retraining those habits, but you're retraining your whole sense of self. Slowly, you'll shift from the person that hides to the person that is right out front and being welcoming. You'll go from someone who sees emotions as a threat to someone who sees them as a gift. And this is where the Taoist way really shines. It's not about performing strength or pretending peace. It's about being steady enough in yourself to let feelings, yours and others, rise and move and pass. And that steadiness isn't flashy. It doesn't look like enlightenment from the outside, but this is where most people, when they first begin Taoist or Zen practice, they believe this enlightenment is going to be like this lightning bolt, and suddenly you're this glowing, gentle being of peace and love. That's not how it happens. Because the transformation starts inside. Suddenly you're not ruled by old conditioning. You're not carrying the weight of shame for having feelings. You're not bracing every time someone else is honest. You're simply there, in the present, and letting it flow. That's the freedom. So the takeaway from all that is this: if you want to live free, you have to find these ways to practice. Stop being afraid. Stop apologizing for having feelings. Stop punishing yourself. Stop punishing others. They arrive, they move through, they leave. The more you let them do that, the more you can speak your truth clearly and hear someone else's without flinching. So we're shifting your identity from fear to steadiness, from masks to presence, from silence and explosions to honesty that heals instead of harms. And the sooner you begin to retrain that posture, the lighter your path becomes. We close today by telling you and reminding all of us that feelings aren't going anywhere. Yours, mine, the people around you, they're part of being alive. Some days they're gentle, some days they crash hard, but they all belong. The difference isn't whether feelings exist. The difference is how we meet them. For most of my life, I thought feelings were dangerous, that speaking up would cost me, that being honest would push people away. And I carried that into early adulthood like some kind of armor, but that armor got heavy. It kept me safe, but it also kept me from being real. It ruined relationships. It ruined jobs that I loved because I couldn't open up. I couldn't be a real person. I had this armor of defensiveness and anger around me. Taoist practice taught me something better, that you don't need armor when you're no longer afraid. So here's what I want you to try this week. Pick one moment where you'd usually swallow your truth. With a friend, a coworker, a partner, even with yourself. And instead of burying it, say it simply. Say the truth. No blame. Don't put someone else's name on it. Don't say you did this to me. Say I feel this way. No blame, no drama, no performance. Name what you feel and let it stand. And when someone else shares something with you, even if it's hard, pause. Take a breath. Hear their words. Don't rush to defend. Don't shrink away. Don't leave the room. Don't yell. Just notice that truth that it's in front of you and let it be there. And you're going to be surprised how freeing that small act can be, because the real weight isn't in the feelings themselves. The whole point of this episode is to remind you that it is the fear of those feelings. Let go of that fear, and you'll find a lighter, cleaner, and easier movement. So we're going to wrap up. Until next time, keep steady, keep clear, and remember, Taoism isn't asking you to fear your feelings. It's asking you to welcome them, let them flow, and keep walking your path. And if this conversation makes you think of someone in your life, please share it with them. Give them the link. The Tao isn't meant to be held alone. Podcasts grow through word of mouth. I would love it if you would pass this along if it resonated with you. And our community builds one share at a time. And I appreciate each and every one of you for everything that you do, because as I said at the beginning of this show, I know that you are making a purposeful and a mindful choice to let me be a part of whatever path you're on, and I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, night, evening, morning, wherever you may be, however you may be listening. I thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at dawananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.